What really went down inside that Cleveland locker room after Sunday's collapse? Because according to those close to the team, it wasn't just frustration, it was explosive. The Browns didn't just lose at MetLife Stadium. They fell apart in front of the entire league, and emotions boiled over the second those cameras stopped rolling. Myles Garrett, the heart and voice of Cleveland's defense, reportedly stormed into the locker room with one thing on his mind: accountability. He wasn't just angry about the scoreboard. He was furious about what he called a lack of direction. And standing right in front of him was head coach Kevin Stefanski, the man many believe is holding this team back. Players described the scene as tense, almost silent, until Garrett finally spoke up. What started as frustration turned into confrontation. Words were exchanged, sharp, emotional, raw. Some teammates tried to calm things down. Others just sat there, heads down. Listening to the two men who define this team go at it. No cameras, no PR spin, just real emotions spilling out after another humiliating loss. And while no one knows exactly what was said, sources suggest this wasn't just a moment of anger. It was a breaking point. Because when your captain starts questioning your head coach, it doesn't just shake the locker room. It shakes the entire organization. And that's exactly what happened in Cleveland that night. The Browns didn't just lose that game. They completely unraveled. What was supposed to be a statement win turned into one of the most humiliating collapses of the season. You could see it on the players' faces as they walked off the field. The disbelief, the exhaustion, the quiet anger that only comes when a team knows it let something big slip away. Myles Garrett, usually calm and composed even in defeat, wasn't hiding his emotions this time. Cameras caught him shaking his head, walking straight past reporters, helmet still in hand, and disappearing into the tunnel without saying a word. But those who were there say that silence didn't last long. Behind the locker room doors, frustration started bubbling. Players slammed helmets, trainers avoided eye contact, and no one said much until Garrett finally broke the silence. His tone wasn't reckless or loud. It was cutting, sharp, and filled with disappointment. He reportedly told teammates that they'd lost their edge and that something deeper was wrong, not with the talent, but with the leadership and direction of the team. And while no one named names right away, everyone in that room knew who he was referring to: head coach Kevin Stefanski. It was an unspoken truth that had been simmering for weeks. Players had whispered about questionable game plans, slow adjustments, and a lack of emotion from the sideline. But Garrett's words made it real. That was the breaking point. The moment frustration turned into confrontation. Some players backed Garrett, nodding quietly in agreement, while others kept their heads down, not wanting to get involved. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. And as Garrett's words hung in the air, one thing became clear. This wasn't just another post-game meltdown. It was a signal that the Browns' locker room, once united under a shared goal, was beginning to fracture. And from that point on, nothing inside that team would ever feel the same. Once the locker room doors closed, everything that had been bottled up for weeks finally started to spill out. The atmosphere was heavy. Helmets tossed aside, the hum of reporters outside barely audible through the walls. Every player could feel it. Something was about to erupt. Myles Garrett sat quietly for a moment, staring at the floor, sweat still dripping down his face. Then he stood up and broke the silence. His voice was calm, but the frustration was ... unmistakable. According to multiple sources, Garrett started by saying what everyone was already thinking: that the team had lost its fire, that they were playing safe, scared, and without purpose. He didn't call anyone out by name at first, but everyone in the room knew exactly where this was headed. Kevin Stefanski stood near the lockers, arms crossed, listening as Garrett spoke. The coach didn't interrupt, not yet. But when Garrett questioned the team's lack of direction, Stefanski reportedly took a step forward and tried to defend his choices. That's when the tone shifted. Voices got louder. The air turned electric. Some players tried to step in, urging both men to cool off, but the tension had already crossed a line. Garrett allegedly told Stefanski that the players were tired of excuses, that they were fighting harder than the game plan itself. Those words cut deep, because for many in the room, it wasn't just frustration, it was truth. Stefanski responded, saying he still believed in the process, in staying calm under pressure, but his steady tone, meant to diffuse, only made things worse. Garrett reportedly shook his head, muttering that calm wasn't what this team needed anymore. By the time it ended, no one had thrown a punch. No one had walked out. But the silence that followed was louder than any argument. Players sat frozen, realizing they had just witnessed something they couldn't unsee. The moment when leadership and locker room collided head-on. And as Garrett walked away, one thought lingered in everyone's mind. This wasn't over. When the shouting finally died down, the room was thick with tension, the kind of silence that comes after something real has been said. But Myles Garrett wasn't finished. He looked around the locker room, eyes moving from teammate to teammate, and said the words that left everyone stunned. According to several insiders, Garrett told the room that the Browns had lost their identity. He said the team that once fought for every inch was now just going through the motions, and that leadership, from the sidelines to the top, had failed them. It wasn't said out of rage. It came from pure frustration. Garrett reportedly told his teammates that football isn't just about talent or schemes. It's about heart. You can't coach passion, one teammate recalled him saying, his voice low but sharp. That line hit everyone differently. Some nodded quietly, while others glanced nervously toward Stefanski, who stood motionless. Garrett then turned directly to his coach and said something that, according to witnesses, made everyone's stomach drop. If we don't believe in the plan, how are we supposed to fight for it? It wasn't an insult. It was a challenge, a moment of brutal honesty from the face of the franchise to the man calling the plays. Stefanski reportedly paused, taking a deep breath before replying that the team needed to stay strong, together, and trust the process. But that only deepened the divide. To Garrett, those words sounded empty, recycled, the same message players had heard week after week as losses piled up. After that, Garrett didn't yell, didn't storm out. He simply grabbed his gear, sat down, and stared at the ground. Slowly, Stefanski stepped forward. His expression didn't change, but everyone could feel the tension radiating off him. This wasn't the calm, media-trained head coach they were used to seeing at the podium. This was a man pushed to his breaking point. Stefanski reportedly told Garrett that he understood the frustration, but reminded him that leadership meant composure, not chaos. His tone was even, but there was an unmistakable edge to it, a quiet defiance. He said the team wasn't lost, that setbacks happen, and that the Browns needed to trust the process. But those words, the same ones players had heard 100 times before, didn't land the way he thought they would. Garrett stared at him, unimpressed. According to one player, the entire room could feel the shift, like watching two powerful forces collide. Stefanski then doubled down, saying the players needed to look inward before pointing fingers at the coaching staff. That comment changed everything. Several teammates exchanged glances. Garrett stood up again, jaw clenched, eyes locked on Stefanski. This time, his voice was quieter but far more intense. He reportedly said, "We've been doing that all season. When are you going to?" That one sentence hit harder than any shout could have. Stefanski didn't respond immediately. He just nodded, almost as if realizing that he had lost the room in that moment. No one dared to speak after that. The argument was over. But the divide had never been clearer. Stefanski eventually walked out, saying only, "We'll handle this like professionals." But by then, the damage was already done. The team wasn't just frustrated, it was fractured. And for the first time, players began to question whether Stefanski's calm demeanor was actually confidence or detachment. In that locker room, one thing became certain. Whatever unity the Browns once had just been shattered, piece by piece, right in front of them. Word of the confrontation didn't stay inside the locker room for long. Within hours, whispers began spreading through the organization, and by the next morning, the story had leaked. What started as quiet tension between player and coach quickly spiraled into a full-blown headline. Sports insiders began dropping vague tweets about chaos in Cleveland, while reporters hinted that the locker room had turned against its own leadership. Inside the building, things were even worse. Players arrived the next day pretending nothing had happened, but everyone felt the shift. Conversations were shorter. Eye contact was rare, and trust, the one thing a football team can't function without, was gone. Garrett, normally the voice of focus and discipline, kept to himself. Stefanski, meanwhile, tried to maintain control, running meetings as if nothing had happened. But it didn't work. The energy was off. The belief was gone. Behind the scenes, the coaching staff reportedly held an emergency meeting discussing how to get the locker room back on track. Some suggested a team-only meeting to clear the air. Others argued that forcing it might only make things worse. It was damage control mode, and everyone knew it. Meanwhile, fans online were relentless. Hashtags like #FireStefanski and #GarrettDeservesBetter started trending overnight. Talk shows lit up with speculation about whether the Browns' star defender had just exposed something deeper. A broken culture, a lost identity, or even the beginning of the end for the Stefanski era. But through all the noise, neither Garrett nor Stefanski made any public statement. No denials, no explanations, just silence. And that silence spoke volumes. To the outside world, it looked like the team was crumbling from within. To those inside, it felt even worse. Like they were standing in the middle of something that had already fallen apart. And as the media storm grew louder, one question echoed across Cleveland. Was this just a heated moment after a tough loss? Or had the Browns finally hit the point of no return? What happened in that locker room wasn't just about a single argument. It was the symptom of something much deeper. A leadership crisis that's been building inside the Browns organization for months. The confrontation between Myles Garrett and Kevin Stefanski didn't come out of nowhere. It was the breaking point of frustration, confusion, and a growing sense that this team, despite all its talent, doesn't have a clear direction. Players have reportedly been quietly questioning the team's identity for weeks. The offense looks lost, the defense feels overworked, and the sideline energy is flat. Some veterans believe Stefanski's calm, analytical approach, once seen as a strength, has now become a weakness. You can't lead emotionless men through emotional battles, one insider reportedly said. It's a statement that sums up what many inside the locker room are starting to feel. Garrett's confrontation might have been loud, but it reflected something that's been whispered privately. The players no longer feel connected to the head coach's message. It's not about schemes or strategy. It's about belief. When a team stops believing in its leader, everything else starts to crumble. Reports suggest several players have been quietly voicing frustration over communication breakdowns, unclear roles, mixed messages, and a lack of accountability. Meanwhile, Stefanski's supporters inside the organization insist he's doing what he can to steady a turbulent ship, and that Garrett's passion simply boiled over in the heat of the moment. But even they can't deny that this latest outburst has forced everyone to take a hard look at what's really going on. The Browns' leadership issue isn't about X's and O's anymore. It's about trust, the one thing that can't be drawn on a whiteboard. And if the locker room truly has lost faith in Stefanski, no game plan or pep talk will fix it. Because once the players stop believing, it's no longer about football. It's about survival. And right now, Cleveland looks like a team trying to hold itself together before everything completely falls apart. In the days that followed the confrontation, Cleveland tried to move on, at least on the surface. Press conferences went on as scheduled, practice routines stayed the same, and the organization pushed a message of focus and unity. But anyone paying close attention could tell something had changed. The energy was different. The smiles looked forced, and every word that came out of Kevin Stefanski's mouth was analyzed under a microscope. At his next media appearance, Stefanski seemed tense but composed. Reporters pressed him on whether rumors of a locker room argument were true. But he dodged every question with polished phrases like, "We're all competitors and emotions run high after losses." To outsiders, it sounded professional. To those inside the building, it sounded like damage control. Myles Garrett, on the other hand, took a quieter route. When reporters caught him after practice, he simply said, "We're moving forward," then walked off without elaborating. But later that night, he posted a cryptic message on social media. A simple line that read, "If you don't fix the cracks, the foundation won't hold." Fans immediately connected it to the locker room drama, and within minutes, it went viral. Teammates were split. Some backed Garrett privately, calling him the emotional leader the team needed. Others defended Stefanski, saying stability was more important than emotion. But beneath all that, there was a growing realization that something irreversible had happened. A trust had been broken. As the next game approached, the team's chemistry looked fragile. Players weren't celebrating big plays the same way. The locker room chatter had quieted, and the tension was visible even during warm-ups. It wasn't chaos. It was worse. It was a calm built on resentment, the kind that eats away at a team from the inside out. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew. That confrontation hadn't ended in the locker room. It had followed them onto the field, into meetings, into every sideline interaction. And unless something changed fast, the Browns weren't just playing against their opponents anymore. They were playing against themselves. What happened between Myles Garrett and Kevin Stefanski wasn't just another emotional locker room moment. It was a reflection of something bigger, a pattern that's haunted the Cleveland Browns for years. Every season begins with hope, talent, and hype. And yet, somewhere along the way, things always seem to spiral. Leadership questions, locker room tension. A team that looks unstoppable one week and unrecognizable the next. This latest confrontation simply peeled back the curtain on what's really been brewing beneath the surface. For Garrett, it wasn't about ego or spotlight. It was about frustration, watching a roster stacked with talent stumble because of inconsistency and indecision. Fans see the same thing every Sunday. A team built to dominate, somehow finding new ways to collapse. Garrett's outburst wasn't just anger. It was the sound of a leader who's tired of wasting potential. As for Stefanski, he's now standing at a crossroads. Once hailed as the calm, collected leader who brought discipline to Cleveland, he's now being questioned for that very same calmness. His steady demeanor, once his greatest strength, is being viewed as emotional detachment. To players in the trenches, it feels like he's lost touch with the heartbeat of the locker room, a place that now runs more on frustration than belief. The national media has already picked its narrative. To them, this is the Browns being the Browns. Chaos, dysfunction, and missed opportunity. But to those inside the organization, it's something far more serious. A reckoning. A moment where the team must decide whether to rally together or completely implode. Because what happened that night wasn't just a clash between player and coach. It was a warning. A signal that leadership, trust, and identity are slipping away. And if Cleveland doesn't find a way to fix it soon, this won't just be another lost season. It'll be remembered as the moment the Browns' foundation finally cracked for good. In the end, what happened in that Cleveland locker room wasn't just another post-game argument. It was a mirror reflecting everything that's wrong with the Browns. Talent everywhere, passion overflowing, but leadership hanging by a thread. Myles Garrett didn't start that confrontation to create drama. He started it because he cares. Because after years of ... disappointment, excuses, and trust the process speeches, he's tired of watching the same story repeat itself. Kevin Stefanski, on the other hand, isn't a villain in this story. He's a coach caught in the middle of chaos, a man trying to keep order while the walls are closing in. His calm, calculated style worked when things were going right. But in moments like this, calm can look a lot like indifference. And in the NFL, where emotions run as high as the stakes, players don't just need strategy, they need fire. The Browns now stand at a crossroads. They can treat this moment as a fracture, letting pride and silence pull them further apart. Or they can face it head-on, turn the confrontation into a wake-up call, and find a way to reconnect before it's too late. Because every great team has breaking points, but it's what happens after the breaking that defines them. For fans, this moment feels painfully familiar. The headlines, the rumors, the sources say, chaos. It's all part of Cleveland's curse. But maybe, just maybe, this one feels different. Maybe this time, the truth being spoken behind closed doors will finally spark change instead of collapse. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about stats or records. It's about pride, unity, and the will to fight for something bigger than a season. Myles Garrett lit a fire in that locker room, whether it burns the Browns down or forges them into something stronger. That's the story that's yet to be written. One thing's certain, this wasn't just another loss. It was the night the Browns were forced to look in the mirror and decide who they really are.